Afternoon, and welcome to the latest in our series of Center for Transportation webinars. My name is Chris Oster. I'm the Thomas O'Brien Fellow here at Eno. Today's webinar is on transportation in the age of biometrics. So in October, the Transportation Security Administration released their Biometrics Roadmap for Aviation Security and the Passenger Experience Report, laying out how the agency plans to use biometric technology to modernize and update the identity verification process. Biometrics have become more commonly used throughout various sectors of the economy. In the case of smartphone technology, for example, many consumers have gotten used to the idea of unlocking their phone using just their face or purchasing apps with a simple thumb scan. The transportation sector has, in many ways, lagged behind other industries in adopting and leveraging these new technologies. Yet, as the TSA roadmap makes clear, biometrics have the potential to revolutionize transportation, enhancing existing security measures and drastically cutting down on wait times. So in this webinar, we have Howard Cass, the Executive Vice President of Corporate Affairs at the biometrics-based identity management firm Clear. And he will be discussing how Clear is already using biometrics to update the decades-old airport identity verification process and where they may be moving in the future. So after his presentation, we will have time for questions. So those listening in, you're encouraged to submit questions and comments through the questions function on your webinar control panel. There's no need to wait until the speaker is done to submit questions, so feel free to submit them throughout the presentation. Thank you all again for taking the time to join us today. And with that, I will let Howard take over.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the Eno Center for hosting today. Really excited to be with everybody. Like transportation is undergoing a kind of a transformative period. We're just making the slides work here. It's that way. Okay. And by that, what I really mean is there's been a lot of change in travel. It's really simple today to decide that you want to go take a trip someplace. Maybe you want to go catch a Champions League game in the UK or go see your favorite rock band on the West Coast. And there's lots of companies today that have made that really easy, whether it's Airbnb or StubHub or Uber to get you to and from the airport. And so that's really a bunch of great companies doing great things to help you in what we call the experience economy go and do and have the experiences you want to have. But in order for that to happen, there's got to be a lot of friction taken out along the way. And as I mentioned, a lot of these companies have done that. But where we continue to see friction, right, is in infrastructure, around the globe. And everyone talks about airports as being one of those places. And we talk about how important it is to reduce friction, to keep pace with the expected demand in travel. And so, there's all kinds of statistics. 257 million people are going to fly in the U.S. For the summer, which is a 3.5% increase. So travel is one of those industries around the world where the annual growth rate is growing faster than generally speaking than GDP. So what do? How do we solve for that problem? Because building new airports, building new runways, all that sort of stuff is really complicated. And this doesn't apply to just airports and airlines, but it could be anywhere in the transportation sector and in other industries where the removal of friction will unlock great consumer benefit and better experiences. So we think here at Clear, one of the ways you do that is by using biometrics, because we know they work. It's relatively low cost, and as you talk about getting more and more friction out of the travel journey, we think biometrics can really lead the way. So much so that we see a lot of statistics around where people talk about travel and doubling of travel. The way we like to think about it at Clear is if you had the infrastructure constraints removed and you had less friction in the travel part, is it really 2 times or 3 times travel? Could you get people to take more and more trips because it becomes so easy and so commonplace that travel growth is 4 and 5 times? And we think biometrics can help with that. So as we mentioned, biometrics are leading the way and taking out friction and solving some of the other challenges, whether it be security or infrastructure at airports and around throughout the travel ribbon. And so right now, there was some research done, and it showed that about $17 billion in the global market for biometrics last year, and that number by 2024 is expected to more than double. And the travel space is probably leading the way when it comes to the biometrics technology, right? Certainly, as Chris alluded to, your smartphones are probably the most experience where most people get access and comfortable with biometrics, but travel's not far behind. And we just think there continues to be unprecedented opportunity to use biometrics to improve the customer experience throughout the travel ribbon. And when you do this, all stakeholders benefit, right? So as I've talked about, we're focused a lot on the consumer at Clear, and removing friction we believe will spur more travel. That of course is good for businesses, but it's also good because biometrics can be a way to know what your customers' likes and dislikes are and help personalize and differentiate the experience. So customers who want to know with certainty what's going to happen at each step along their journey, you're better able to manage and meet those expectations. And for other customers who want a differentiated experience or want to do something different, you're also able to benefit them as well. And then from the government perspective, biometrics are really important because they enhance safety and security, right? It's maybe an unfortunate commentary on our times, but the days of large crowds congregating in places in an anonymous style are going to be harder and harder because of the security concerns and the risks to public safety. And no one wants to see bad things happen, but when governments or when venue operators or airports or airlines know who's in their facility and knows who they are and can help them unlock a better, more efficient path forward, that's good for everybody. It enhances the safety and security, and that gives people confidence in attending events or traveling, again, towards the idea of reducing travel friction and enhancing travel. At the end of the day, it's really about bringing simplicity and security and removing friction. So what does that look like? It can be lots of different things. Clear is probably best known today for its sort of certain and predictable security experience at the checkpoints at over 30 U.S. airports. But we're also in stadiums offering fast and predictable entry into baseball games or football games or other sporting events in different arenas. You can use biometrics to help people drop off their luggage, to board their flight where their face becomes their boarding pass, to pick up a rental car with using their face. In Seattle, we're actually working with a couple of the sports teams there, and you're able to, instead of showing a driver's license to prove that you're old enough to buy a beer, you're able to use your fingerprints to not only buy the beer, but to pay for it as well, all in the same transaction, which offers terrific speed and convenience, and also gives the venue operator a really high degree of certainty that the person buying that beer is indeed 21 and old enough to drink. Future applications and things sort of on the bottom of the picture. Imagine, because we can validate your age with your biometrics, buying a beer out of a vending machine. That way you're not even waiting in the line. It's all there, and that's what the future begins to look like. Chris alluded to the government sort of moving into biometrics for purposes of facilitating air travel, and he noted that TSA rolled out a roadmap of how they intend to introduce more and more biometrics into the aviation security process. That's something that we've been heavily interested in. What they're doing is of course different from what we're doing in the private sector, but ultimately what they're trying to do is make the customer experience smoother, faster, better, while at the same time increasing security and having a stronger sense of the people that they're screening are in fact who the people say they are, and it's the people that are supposed to be there in the lines. The FAA is considering it for pilot authentication. The Department of Defense, of course, is trying to use it in lots of ways, but access to facilities being a key one. A lot of the standards that we live up to and that Clear is required to meet in order to do what it does as a registered traveler program are set by the NIST and administered by a lot of the different government agencies. So there's a lot of innovation taking place in the space. The government is moving to harness that innovation for the purposes of making sure that in critical industries things are safe, secure, and where it's consumer facing, there's an even better experience for the consumer. And what's nice about biometrics is there's a lot of opportunity here for public-private partnerships. There's just so much to do. There's so many different use cases. I mean, I'm sure if we were to pull up every federal agency and focus on what they do, we could come up with numerous use cases where biometrics would improve the consumer access or improve the outreach by that agency, or and make things, again, take friction out of a process that, depending on what it is, can be very cumbersome and very hard to cut through, or just really difficult to deal with. I mean, one of the areas that CLEAR thinks about is we're getting into healthcare, and all of us know when you go to a doctor's office, the first thing that happens upon getting there is they hand you a clipboard with a bunch of papers on it. It doesn't matter how often you go to the doctor. You could go every week. You're still getting the same clipboard every week. So imagine, again, using your biometrics to check in at the doctor's office and merely confirming that everything is there and updated and current. Again, that provides security, a high degree of certainty that you are who you say you are. It gives the doctor's office a lot of certainty about payment, cutting down on fraud, and it makes for a better customer experience and a better patient experience. So lots of ways in lots of places, not just in transportation, but outside. And that's why there's lots of federal agencies and state agencies that are looking at biometrics as a way, and partnering with the private sector as a way to improve the current process or the current system. Now, that's not to say that we just can't, full speed ahead and just push forward. We at CLEAR are particularly proud of the fact that we are very careful and very responsible about the use of biometric technology, and we want to make sure it's done right, because that's good for everyone. The broader the acceptance, everybody wins. And so, we got some lessons. Obviously, before you run, you got to walk, and the technology needs to be tested thoroughly under lots of different circumstances. Depending on the biometric modality, there are different challenges and different issues that they all come with. But that's one of the reasons, for example, at CLEAR, we use multiple modalities. If you're familiar with our airport product, you can verify with either your irises or your fingerprints, because we're about getting to the right answer, and sometimes one modality works better on a person than another. So you've got to talk about that. We certainly understand the communication and all the concerns around data, and so it's important you communicate, and over communicate is also really important. If the public understands what's going on and they get the efficiency and the benefits, they're going to be accepting of it. If you're not transparent about it, that's going to create a lot of challenges. So we at CLEAR are always happy to talk to folks about it and communicate what we do. And that leads to sort of the next point, is you've got to, of course, be mindful of where your data goes. We all know and are all familiar with all the issues about data privacy and data protection and all the concerns that are there. And we take that very seriously. At CLEAR, we don't sell or share data. It's in our corporate DNA. Everything at CLEAR is opt-in, and it's very easy to opt in, or if it's not something you want to do, opt out. And we think that there's a lot of opportunity for the industry to build upon that, and for everybody to give as much information and be careful about where the data goes. And look, the last point is something, and it's not just a lesson for biometrics companies, it's really a lesson today for any company, is you've got to invest in cybersecurity, right? We all know about data leaks and hacks and all the problems they cause, from inconvenience to actual harm being done to people, and everything that you read about in the papers and see on the TV. So we agree with that, we support that, and we understand why, when that doesn't go right, regulators and legislators are going to take take a dim view of that sort of stuff. So we understand. I mentioned all that. At CLEAR, we work with the government entities on cybersecurity and information security. We've got numerous certifications. We've got high standards, and always want to try and reassure our customers that their public is and their data is safe. We're always looking at our privacy protocols. When we see a new piece of legislation or a new regulation being proposed in this space, we're always taking a look at it and going, all right, how do we compare to that? Are we there now? Does that get, what does that do? Is it something we can add? What is it? And we want to understand it and be in front of it. We understand that we're working in an industry that's somewhat still, and that there's still a lot to be done to gain consumer trust, because we hear it when consumers say, I'm just not comfortable giving you that data, or I don't want my fingerprints in somebody else's database. So we fully understand that, and we're very mindful of that, and always thinking about those sorts of things. And that is my presentation. Again, thanks to the Eno Center for a chance to talk about biometrics and transportation. We think that there's a lot of opportunity for biometrics to lead to not just a doubling of travel, of air travel in the next 10, 15 years, but if we took out more and more friction in the process, we think it could be an even higher number. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Howard. That's a very interesting presentation. So we have a number of questions that have been submitted already, but feel free to continue to ask them. And you can do this again through your question function. And for anyone wondering, we will be posting today's slides on our website as well. So Howard, there's been some questions on sort of what CLEAR is necessarily doing to ensure individuals have as much control as possible over their own information, whether that's how it's shared, with whom, and under what circumstances. So if you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so first of all, everything you do with CLEAR is opt-in, right? We don't send your data anywhere or share it with anyone. We don't sell it. There's no revenue line in the CLEAR revenue budget for data sales. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened since the company was founded, and it will continue to be that way. In terms of sharing data, we don't share any data, as I mentioned, but what I would make an interesting point. For example, when you go in Seattle, if you're at a Mariners or Seahawks game to buy a beer, we know that because you've enrolled as a member, we know that you're old enough. Let's assume you're over the age of 21 and you're old enough to drink. We know that. And when you put your fingerprints down and we assert that that's you, all we're sharing with the beer vendor is a check mark that basically says that you're old enough to drink. We don't share any personal data. So we're actually providing less data to the beer vendor than you would if you went up and pulled out your driver's license and physically handed your driver's license to that person. Then they see your driver's license, they see your name, your address, your height, your weight, all that sort of stuff. We don't share all that data. All we're sharing is a check mark that says you're over the age of 21. And I just, as I mentioned in the beginning, anybody who wants to link to one of our partners, again, that's opt-in at their choice.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question here about sort of what are the roles between both the private and public sector in terms of biometrics? Where do you foresee the public sector doing and the private sector doing to sort of form some cooperative nexus that'll best serve the area of biometrics?
So the public sector, of course, meaning government, is going to be the regulator, right? That's their role. That's what government does. And in fact, what you see in the airports at the security checkpoint that CLEAR operates under is the Registered Traveler Program. That's a program that was created by Congress, and it's administered by the TSA, and that's where CLEAR operates. And so we are quite happy to work with the TSA in a public-private partnership as a registered traveler program. we do that. If other companies want to do that, they can go through the requirements and get there. One of the things I would say is the technology is moving fast, the market's moving fast, and while it's not to say that government doesn't play a role beyond regulating and biometrics, given the speed of the market, it is one of those things where certainly the private sector is driving a lot of innovation and a lot of technology. And that's an opportunity for government to be able to pick best of breed, the newest technologies by partnering with the private sector, while of course regulating standards and cybersecurity and all those sorts of things the government does best.
Great. So in terms of sort of the reduction of friction at airports, people are curious about where are you getting the statistics on increasing sort of aviation capacity by just reducing the frictionless wait times at airport security lines, for example. How is that necessarily going to lead to an increase in air travel?
So, as I said, if you want to book a trip to go catch your favorite band on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, you can go online, you can buy 2 tickets at StubHub, you can book your Airbnb, you can arrange for your Ubers or Lyfts or whatever to pick you up and take you to and from the airport. You can obviously book your air travel online. So you've taken all the friction of that process out from a generation ago where you had to, call the Marriott and call the airline and take a cab and maybe find a newspaper to find a pair of tickets. I mean, it's really hard to do that. But what hasn't improved is getting through the checkpoint, right? The lines are long, they're uncertain. There's a lot of in a lot of places it's not predictable, right? Sometimes they move really fast, other times you could be there 30 or 45 minutes. So that causes a stress and a friction in your getting through security. And you start to add up those little cases of friction, and I just pointed to one, and you finally conclude, yeah, all that other stuff's easy, but it's a hassle to fly, and I don't want to travel. So if we could take that friction out of the travel process, out of the travel ribbon, so much of it's come out already through the companies that I mentioned. If you could take that out, you would take that trip. Maybe you do that twice a year. Maybe you would do it 4 times a year. And so you give people more time. You give people back time to do as they see with their time and how they want to do it, and they get to enjoy the other side of the checkpoint, right? Maybe they want to go sit in the club or they want to shop in the airport. And if you take the friction at the checkpoint as just one example out, it's a better experience. At Clear, we're aiming to take it out of the bag drop, out of the checkpoint, out of the boarding process, and elsewhere along the ribbon.
And as sort of a follow-up to that, so with regards to airports and some of the quicker security measures such as TSA PreCheck, global entry, the Trusted Traveler program, do you see Clear as a complement to that, as a replacement to that, or just what are the sort of synergies that are that might come from that?
Yeah, we love PreCheck. We are complementary to PreCheck. PreCheck keeps you keep your stuff in your bag, keep your coat on, keep your shoes on. What we at Clear are doing at the security checkpoint is giving you a predictable, certain experience every time you get there, right? And you know if you're a Clear member, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. You're not worried about it because you know when you get there, you're going to get right into the security screening lane. If you're a PreCheck member, and over 70% of our Clear members are PreCheck eligible. And so they know that they're going to get to the airport, they're going to get through the Clear verification process very quickly, and they're going to be part of the into PreCheck and keeping their coat on and their shoes on and their stuff in their bag.
Great. And I think we have time for maybe one more question. So we've talked a lot about aviation. But what about other modes of transportation? How does Clear see working with sort of the automobile industry, public transport? Are there plans for moving into those spaces as well and outside of just aviation?
Yeah, so look, anywhere where there's a friction point or a bottleneck or a jam or something, I suspect biometrics can help make that better, smooth that out. So, we're talking to companies from the driverless, the autonomous vehicles to other modes of transportation, whether it be ships or trains. And we have different conversations with all kinds of companies along the travel ribbon all the time, and we're looking for compelling use cases where we can offer our members a really terrific improvement in the experience that they're having today. And so when we think about new verticals and new opportunities, that's how we think about it. We started, of course, in aviation, and we've got a large and robust aviation presence, and that continues to grow. But we're very excited about what we do with Hertz, for example, where you rent the car if you're a Hertz President's Club member, and you drive off the lot by having your face as your driver's license in your rental agreement. So we see all kinds of opportunity to replace friction and bottlenecks throughout the transportation ribbon, whether it's planes, trains, or automobiles.
Great, and I think we have just enough for one more, but there's some questions about the actual storage of the data. Are there any thoughts about using sort of blockchain technology as an enhanced method to secure data for Clear?
So look, we are FISMA High certified by the U.S. government and have got numerous other government certifications. We take data protection and security. It is job one at Clear. It is what we obsess about. We have a full team dedicated to that all the time. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into all the things that we do, but just know that we spend a lot of time. We've invested a lot of money and really focusing on a layered approach so that there's not one. There just isn't one way to get there, and everything we do with customer data is encrypted all the time, no matter where it is. And we just know we have a layered approach. We spend a lot of time on it. We've got a whole team dedicated to it, and it is always every day. The first thing we wake up and think about is making sure our members' data is safe and secure.
All right, and with that, I think we're just about out of time. Howard, thank you very much for spending the last half hour with us. That was a great presentation and Q&A session. I also want to thank all of our attendees for their participation. Before we close out, I have a few announcements from the events page on Eno's website. So on July 24th, we will be hosting part 1 of our webinar series on microtransit titled From Pilot to Transit System Integration. Part 2 will follow later on August 13th. And I also want to encourage all of you to subscribe to Eno Transportation Weekly, which is an invaluable resource on all aspects of transportation policy and practice. So once again, many thanks for everyone's participation, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thanks. Claire?